Welcome to Let's Get It, the Atheist Roundtable. Toss the mic, tell us what's good tonight. Yeah, get this man a goddamn cam so we can plan to crush tonight. It's murder. It was the case they gave him. Even Jesus couldn't save him. He believes he'll slay him. Murdershed Steve got these theists on their fucking knees. Ask T Jump where the Murdershed be,
Chop it up.
Why you asking all these questions? What are you suggesting? Why am I second guessing? Then GSEB surgically removing these hypotheses. Yeah, and get out the way. Get out the way. This kid don't play. If you got a God, I'd call him. If you got a book, I'd hide him. Just Jeff. Question so hard they'll punch you in the chest. So the best bet, invest in a bulletproof vest. Ozzy, kamikaze. Run the track back and attack what we lack. Stand back, I unpack the counter attack. And the comeback, the sad sack. They should've never said that. And faith is bullshit as a matter of fact.
Which faith is bullshit.
Man, we're going down on a deep down.
Which faith is bullshit.
Hey, somebody mute Oz.
Which faith is bullshit. Which faith is bullshit. What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Atheist Roundtable. I'm Oz. We got Jeff. Just Jeff. What's up, Jeff?
You know, just enjoying this weather.
Is it warm? Is it warm there?
Cool. I like cold weather. I can wear hoodies.
Okay. Well, yeah, where I'm at, it's you walk outside and you about get frostbite as soon as you walk out the front door. So
no, I have no soul, so I can't get frostbite.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. My bad. My bad. Cold-blooded. So, Jeff, a couple things that we have coming up that I'd love to talk about. Well, tomorrow we have, so tomorrow night we have a debate, theist and atheist debate on morality, and Eddie will be the theist, the Christian that's debating, but I'm not going to say who the atheist debater is because I'm keeping it a secret from Eddie.
Is it me?
It very well could be.
I'm not prepared.
It very well could be just Jeff, or it could be anyone. But I'm not going to say. Oh, I would love that. but I'm keeping Eddie on his toes, so I haven't said anything yet. And then on the 23rd, did you hear what's happened on the 23rd, Jeff?
No, tell me. 23rd of that's the eve of Christmas Eve.
January 23rd.
Oh, okay.
So we're planning ahead here. We're going to have a 6-person panel debate on who is Jesus. You know, so if we look at history, look at the Bible, who is Jesus? Who was Jesus? Is the Bible accurate in its depiction, or is it many characters all kind of lumped into one, or is it just a myth? Is Jesus just a myth? So I'm really, really excited to get to the 23rd for that. But then on the 23rd, to kind of rewind, I just got this finalized today on the 26th. My bad, 26th of December, the day after Jesus's day.
Right.
We're going to have Dr. Josh and Seamus come on, and they're going to talk about Dr. Josh's reason for leaving faith, why he walked away from faith.
Does that have to do with slavery?
I bet you that has. I bet you that has something to do with it. But that one's going to be awesome. Really looking forward to that. It'll be a lot of fun. So what I want to do, Jeff, is bring on our guest for today. Everybody that saw the thumbnails and everything, that his name is Greg. But Greg's he's a great guy. I've got to talk to him several times through the Empathetic Atheist show, and Justin, he's been on their channel, been in their chats, things like that. So I'm looking forward to it. But let's get Greg on here. Greg, how are you, sir?
Hey, I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me.
Good. No, it's when you and I chatted. It was about 2 weeks ago. I reached out to you to see if you want to come on and talk. You'd actually talked to Jeff and I on one of our call-in shows.
Okay.
And it was a great conversation. It's one of those things when it's a call-in show, it kind of gets cut shorter than even we would like, So I wanted to try to continue that dialogue. So I will leave you two gentlemen to chat, and I'll talk to you here in a few minutes, Greg.
Sounds good. All right.
Bye-bye. So Greg, now that we can get to some business, get that guy off the screen. But so what we didn't get to do during the call-in show was get a little bit of your background. We didn't have time for that. So what can you tell us about, where you come from, where you're at, and how you got to where you're at today? Oh,
you bet. Yeah. I mean, I've basically lived my whole life in Texas, and I grew up as a Christian. Been probably active as a Christian probably as long as I can remember. I don't even, a lot of people could say I can remember the date when I became saved. I can't. It's always been there, and just been someone who is active in that, but active in a lot of things as well. I mean, I kind of see myself as someone that likes to participate in a lot of different things, try new things, art, music, writing, sports, you name it. If there's something to try, I want to do it.
Well, yeah, you were talking about art earlier. So tell me a little bit about, I see, do we have an easel on your left shoulder there?
Yeah, it's one. I've got a couple of different works I'm working on right now. Like I'm painting a painting that's Napoleon Bonaparte going over the Alps into Italy during his Italian campaign. So doing something like that. I just finished painting, was commissioned to do Hogwarts Castle with Diagon Alley. So I did that for someone. Do a lot of chalk art out on my sidewalks. Do a lot of sketching. And so I do a lot of things.
So I did go to art school.
Okay.
That wasn't a lie.
Yeah.
And I went to Art Institute in Atlanta for video stuff. And I know I look young, but to date myself, when we were in studio, we were switching from standard definition to high definition when I was in college. That's when I went there. So anyway, part of the requirements when you go to an art school, even for video, is to take like color theory, science of light, and 2D design.
Okay.
And I can't draw a straight line with a ruler. So, so here I am in these painting classes with kids that are also in school for art that are genuinely, artists. And I'm hiding in the back trying to hide my work. And it's laughable, some of the paintings I had to do. I get the color theory, like I'm good with color, but I have no method with my hands to make art. I have to use video, or photography or something else is my art form. So I really envy somebody that can have a straight hand and do some detailed work. That is not something I can do.
It was interesting because I've never had an art class, actually. I watched Bob Ross for 2 years on TV, and I thought, well, he says I should be able to do this if I just pick it up and go. So I decided I'd try. My first painting was not great.
Yeah.
But it was something that I just kind of kept working at. And actually, my oldest son, I had been coaching his sports, and he'd gone into his own thing with cross country and swimming. And I was like, okay, how do I relate to my son? So he was at the time taking an art class in his school and would come home with sketches. And so I said, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll start sketching whatever you sketch, just so we'd have something to talk about. Just trying to build a relationship with your son. And one thing led to another. My youngest got into drama, and he would, they'd have the parent set day where you'd come in and build the sets. And all of a sudden I found myself doing most of the painting and designing and all that. And I was like, holy cow. And just recently I did a backdrop that was 60 feet by 30 feet and did it in 3 days with a group. Yeah. That
I don't know if I could do that with 2 colors.
Okay. Yeah. But I don't grid anything. I don't draw. I don't come in with a plan. I just start drawing.
Yeah. That sounds more like my deal. I don't do a whole lot of planning. So then tell me a little bit about, so you grew up in Texas.
Yeah.
Do you have a specific denomination that you grew up in?
I started off in the Methodist church, and kind of ran into some things that when I came home from church, I remember one day my dad said, "What did you think about what the pastor was saying on some subject matter?" And I said, "I don't think that's right." And my parents said, "Okay, you're right." So we started looking for some other churches and ended up in the Evangelical Free Church.
Okay.
Which is kind of a non-denominational Bible church. It is a denomination, but it's kind of has a non-denominational feel. Like if you've ever heard of Chuck Swindoll.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it was the church that I believe he started out in California that I was a part of. And then went off to university, married my wife, came back to Dallas, and she was a part of a large Southern Baptist church. So I've been in the Southern Baptist church ever since. So although I say I don't really care what denomination you are.
Yeah, I had when I went to high school, like I was saying earlier. So I lived in Atlanta, and not a great part for school. And so my parents were buying a house in the suburbs in a very good school district, and I was not able to transfer my credits to that. So I got into private schools where they put me instead of there, and it happened to be a non-denominational high school, but it was reality Southern Baptist is the majority. And at the time I was the only Catholic there. I take that back. Me and the Spanish teacher were the only Catholics there. And so that was actually started my deconversion journey kind of started there, because there were so many different denominations there with wildly different interpretations of the same book. But also, I found myself on the receiving end of having to defend Catholicism to people that like Methodists, or Lutherans, which hate Catholics with a passion, or they are told that Catholics are basically a false Christian religion. So I'm having to explain and look into things and do research and figure things out. And that was when sometimes you'd look some stuff up and you'd be like, maybe this doesn't maybe they got something right. Maybe they know something I don't about this. So that's part of it for me, at least.
Yeah. I grew up in San Antonio. So I had a lot of Catholic friends, ended up going to some CCD classes with them and that kind of thing. So I understood what the Catholics believe. Again, you heard me say, I don't really care what denomination you are. I think that probably if Christianity is right, that there'll probably be a lot more Catholics in heaven than some people think, or they'll be surprised. And then there may be fewer Southern Baptists that would be there, because it really, it doesn't matter denomination. It matters about what your relationship is with God.
Well, there's a South Park episode where they go to heaven, and actually Saddam Hussein's being punished, so they send him to heaven. And when he gets there, everybody in heaven's Mormon.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And he was very upset because they're like, "Oh, look, let's go play board games and go do all this other stuff." And he wasn't very happy with that.
Yeah.
But we don't know, what the requirements are. I did like the things I did like about the Catholic Church, though, was kind of the organization and the history. Yeah. And I think it's more, and I think that's why one reason I'm so enveloped with religion, even as an atheist. I want history. I like the history of Christianity. I like the history of where the Bible came from. There's a lot of archaeological evidence that leads to some of those events, and also cults. Like I really like reading about like the Branch Davidians or some other cultish kind of stuff, Mormons, things like that, which I find really interesting about the history of how the human brain can be kind of tricked in those areas and things like that. That's what I think still holds me, why I'm here, why we're having this discussion, and why I even care about religion is studying that history. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. Like Branch Davidian, I happened to be in Waco at the time when all that was going on. The ATF was in the La Quinta Inn that was right next to my apartment complex.
Wow.
So kind of interesting. I lived that history. And then the Mormon faith with Joseph Smith and the studies that are going there. I've had quite a few Mormons that when I have conversations with them, they go, "Oh, wait a minute, you actually do understand what we believe," which is sometimes Christians do, sometimes they don't. So I believe it's important to study what other people think. And because it sometimes shapes your thoughts. I've actually had conversations recently with Christians where I said, I've grown more in my Christian faith by talking with atheists and with Muslims of late, because of the challenges they've given to me and forced me to go and look at my presuppositions or my thoughts and say, okay, wait a minute, why do I believe what I believe? And so I think God can use anyone in anyone's life to guide them and to help them to grow. So
Yeah. Well, let's shift gears now and let's see who's next.
yeah.
Hi,
Hey,
how are you?
I'm doing well.
Awesome. Awesome. So, that was a lot of interesting information. I guess just to get the ball rolling, I have a question. What do you think, because you said something, I just want to dive into that a little bit more. When you said Christians talking to atheists have strengthened their faith, do you have any specific examples that you could point to?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that stands out to me, at one point I was of the belief that God had free will in particular, and through some challenges, talking with some Justin in particular about determinism and thoughts along those lines. One of the things that struck me was that in truth, God probably doesn't have free will. He's driven by his nature. The Bible even says that he has a good, perfect, and pleasing will. And if you think about it, it says that God can't lie, he can't sin, he can't choose to do things that are unrighteous and that would go contrary to his perfect state of righteousness. And if that's true, then he really can't he doesn't truly have free will. He can't contradict perfection. And so I think that led to a lot of different thoughts in terms of, okay, when someone says that God is immoral because he forces people to do certain things as if he does it arbitrarily, it made me realize, okay, wait a minute. If God is driven by his nature and he can't do something that would contradict perfection because in essence he would become imperfect and therefore would become something less than God, that his nature drives what it means to be moral. If anything I do, it leaves me in a state of incompatibility with his perfection. He can't change what he is. He just is this state. And so if you're defining and how he defines what's moral is not because arbitrarily he says, hey, I like this and I'm going to dictate that you have to live this way. It's that he's saying, no, this is who I am. And if you live in a different way, it makes you in a state of incompatibility with me. And if you're incompatible with me and I'm the source of life, then in essence, you leave yourself in a state where you're in a state of death or a state where you would end up being separated from life.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That kind of gets and I'm still brushing up on and learning a lot about philosophy and the different kind of moral philosophy ideals like determinism, which I lean more towards. But just something that you said kind of draws into question for me his ability to be all powerful.
Omnipotent. Yeah.
Yeah. So if he can't do something which is outside of himself, then how is he, you know what I mean? Like the logical fallacy. So that just brings into, I guess, for my personal background, there's a lot of people that read the Bible all the way through and they're just like, this doesn't make sense to me. There's this horrible verse. There's this horrible verse, which is true. And that's why they became an atheist. But for me personally, I became an atheist because I had a ton of issues with the logical fallacies that is an omnimax God that created everything and is all powerful, all knowing, all perfect, all good.
Yeah.
Just it clashes for me logically. So I personally can't, I can't reconcile that. And I can't believe that exists because there's so many logical contradictions to me personally, at least. So how do I deal with that?
Yeah.
How do you reconcile that?
Well, I mean, I think omnipotence, when you talk about that, it means that you have the power to do all things. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to wield that power at all times. And I think part of that comes in when you look at the interaction of a perfect God who is omniscient with creating something that has free will. If you truly create something and give it free will, then that means that you have to allow it to act in accordance with its will, or it's not really free. It's not really having its choice. So
can you say that again? Just sorry, my brain's working.
yeah, no.
Repeat that.
So if you're an omniscient God who's all powerful, omnipotent as well, and you choose to create something that has free will, if it's going to truly have free will, it means that you can't impose your will upon that thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you've taken away free will. And so when you deal with that with omnipotence, it's that God could do it, but if he does step in, he actually takes away free will. So there's the tension with God between, does he have the power to make something happen? Yes. But if he's going to choose to allow something to have free will, he's going to mask his power or hold back his power from intervening. And I think it's a huge tension that's there.
Right, for sure. So I guess my question from there is, I still have trouble, like if God himself, as you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, right?
Yeah.
God does not have free will. He can only be who he is, and what he is determined by
his nature. It'd be like a law of physics. If I came to someone and said that, hey, we're going to defy gravity, it's like, well, no, gravity just is what gravity is. And yeah, so God is just who God is.
Right. He does not have free will. So again, that draws into question, how can he also be all powerful if he doesn't have free will?
Well, I would say that what he has is supersedes free will, because if your will is good, perfect, and pleasing, which is what the Bible describes his will as being, then for him to choose any other state other than that would be choose something that was less than perfect. And so why would he ever do that? Right. So it's both, it's an act of, you can say it's an act of the will to not choose, but I would say if he chose anything other than a good, perfect, and pleasing will, he would be choosing something that's less than perfect. He himself would become less than perfect then. And yeah, so. Okay,
like I totally see where you're coming from, for sure.
Yeah, and I would actually, if you don't mind me saying, because I was thinking about this last night, I actually think the fact that there are creatures that have free will is when he has good, perfect, and pleasing will. I think it is a demonstration of why he actually is omnipotent, not that he is not omnipotent, because he's, if you think about it, if these things are going to go outside of his will, and his will is good, perfect, and pleasing, it goes contrary to everything about himself to allow this thing to live outside of his will. He's allowing something to be imperfect in his existence. And for him to actually allow that to be means that he has to have the power to hold back his will, because his will would say destroy that thing, or his will would be to not allow that to operate outside of what is good and perfect and pleasing. Right. And yet he allows it for a time to do that.
So I guess my question from there, something else that I struggle with is, like, if he created us, and I mean, there's so many things, my brain's going in a million different directions, so I apologize in advance.
No, it's fine.
So if he creates everything, and his nature, as you said, is good, perfect, and pleasing, right?
Yes.
And why not? Okay, so let's bring in, like, the devil, right?
Yes. Yes.
Like, why not destroy that evil, and why give us free will at all if we're his creations, and just allow us to be in his perfect and pleasing and wonderful presence? Like, why have all this?
Absolutely, it's a great question.
Right, because, like, it's just, if our place here on earth is some sort of test, then I find that to be kind of messed. Like, he created everything, and he knows what's going to happen, and free will comes.
I spent 3 years just
and,
thinking about that question, just to let you know.
Huh?
I spent 3 years on that question alone.
Yeah, same. Probably more.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, because I think the question is, why would an omniscient God who's perfect in every way, meaning he's also perfectly content, he's perfectly without need, why would he create anything that has free will? Because if you think about it, if he creates anything that has free will, he's created the only thing that could disrupt perfection.
Correct, which is outside of his nature.
Which is crazy. And if he's perfectly loving and he's omniscient, then he knows. And let's start with the angels, because he created the angels first. If he created the angels and he knows a third of them are going to end up choosing to rebel against him and therefore end up in a state of incompatibility with him, where they go into hell is their destiny, and he doesn't need anything that they would provide, how does that make him a perfectly loving God or a perfectly compassionate God? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Right, just create them without free will, and then you can have people that are in harmony, and he created this beautiful landscape. And
absolutely. So, and that's a great question to go, because then you see, but he still created them, right? According to the Bible.
Allegedly.
Yeah. According to the Bible, he still created them. And that makes no sense, because the perfectly loving thing to do would be, don't create anything that has free will, because then everything's going to operate in your good, perfect, and pleasing will.
Right.
And therefore nothing ends up having to go to hell. But for some reason, this perfectly loving God, who's perfectly content in all ways and omniscient and knows what the outcome is going to be, still created the angels to have free will. And so the great question is why? And I think the only answer that makes sense is that he was compelled to do so. And now every red flag in your former Christian life is going up, saying, wait, but if he's compelled to do it, then he's not God. That other thing is God, because it's compelling him to do something, right?
Right.
So
it's, yeah.
So
and that's
I
just,
go on
that's
from
just
there.
that's just like one example of something that is hard to wrap your mind around when you consider the vastness and the powerfulness of a God claim that is omnimax. And another question is, like, okay, for example, can God defeat Satan in a way that doesn't mess with our free will?
Yes. I think he does that at the cross.
How?
Because if you at the cross is the first of all, let me say the reason why I think Satan's called Satan is because at the end of the fall, his rebellion in heaven, I think it's there that he's given a title. He's changed from the angel of light to this title of Satan, which means the adversary, or I think it's more aptly stated, the accuser. And I think what ends up happening is that Satan actually accused God of not being God, that you can't be perfectly loving and perfectly just at the same time. Because if you are perfectly loving, how could you condemn us to an eternity of hell? But if you don't condemn us to that, and I rebelled against you, then how can you call yourself perfectly just? Because
especially when you created hell before you even created the angels.
Did he say? Does the Bible say he created hell before he created angels? If he did, there's a statement of omniscience.
The timeline is that he created the angels.
Yes.
And then Lucifer, the angel of light, challenged God, and then God cast him into hell.
Actually, hell's not been opened according to the Bible yet.
Sorry, what? That's a new one.
Yeah, the Bible says that the hell is not opened until after the final judgment. That where he's been cast now is probably something more like Tartarus. It would be a holding tank of sorts. That
purgatory?
Not purgatory. It would be what is described. I think it's in the book of Jude that he cast them to the lowest. The Greek word is Tartarus, which is like their lowest level of I don't even know how to describe it. It's not hell. Hell, the Bible says specifically that hell is opened after the final judgment, when after the millennial kingdom, he takes all that have chosen to stay in rebellion against him, and he casts them into this place called hell. And in truth, probably what hell is basically the one place where God in his omnipresence, where he chooses not to be. And therefore you end up in a place that in the absence of God, this is what it's like.
So if he casts Lucifer, now Satan, into some place, right?
Yes. Yes.
Do you believe that Satan still influences the people here on earth?
Yes.
Okay, so all right.
Yeah.
So
I don't necessarily think he's there right now.
So my question is, like, Satan's not defeated then, even after the crucifixion, because he's still tempting and ruining the chances of God's creations to be with God.
Well, it's because at that point, man and God's creation is still in a place where they get the choice of what they're going to do, and so the choice remains there. And let me say that I don't actually believe that Satan was cast into Tartarus. It actually says that there were angels that didn't mind their rightful abode, and they were cast there. I think the Bible is pretty clear that Satan roams the earth.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't think Satan's been cast in, and that would lead to the question of God, why after the rebellion, why didn't you just cast Satan into hell and be done with it?
Correct. And just let your creation, because, as a mother, I'm not trying to compare myself to God or anything, sure. But, as a mother,
you were created in his image, so you kind of think along those lines. So, are you still there? Your screen blanked on me. Oh, she might be back.
Hold on, we'll give.
Yeah, but that's a great question.
Yep. So she'll. I'm sure there
she is. I think.
I'm
okay,
here.
she's back.
Just to finish my thought real quick, as a mom, I have a daughter. She's amazing, right? So it's one of those things where I can't imagine anything that she could do, anything where I can say, what's a good punishment for that is torture forever and ever and ever, not even murdering someone. Of course, I would be disappointed and sad, but I would still love her. And I wouldn't want to, I think jail for life, for a long time would be a sufficeable punishment, or maybe to just change her brain chemistry, see the errors of her ways.
Yeah.
But it's, it's one of those things. It's just hard for me to wrap my mind around that, there's this omnimax being that has all these logical fallacies that are hard for me to wrap my mind around. And then to top it all off, what is the purpose of the Bible, right? The purpose of the Bible, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is to, bring people to God, to spread God's word, and to get people to come to God. But in fact, it does the opposite in a lot of cases. So it's just,
I think part of that is because of misconceptions that people have about the Bible. Like, what do you think the purpose of the law was?
What law?
10 Commandments, let's say, or let's say any of the law that's in the Bible. All those, don't do this, do that.
The purpose, I
see Just Jeff says control people.
Okay. I wouldn't know the purpose of.
You don't know the purpose of it?
Well, I would say maybe the 10 Commandments make a little bit of sense in saying, hey, these are a good baseline to, here's how to be a good person, or here's some things you should keep in mind when you're interacting with your fellow humans on the daily basis. But I mean, there's lots of laws that are in the Old Testament that
Why would he say not to eat shellfish or
or wear
something else?
clothes of two different, like what is that actually, how does that bring people closer to God? And even like in 1 Timothy 2:11, I believe, through 12, which is as a woman hard for me to wrap my mind around, like how is that supposed to bring me closer to God? Because that just makes me feel like a second class.
Verse is where it says that you're not supposed to pastor. Is that what that verse is?
It says a woman should learn in quietness and full submission. I do not permit a woman to teach or to assume authority over a man. She must be quiet.
Okay.
So like my question real quick. So my question is, if God's word is perfect and God is perfect, how is that perfect?
I'll answer the one about Timothy, and then let me tell you about the law. The one about Timothy, if you look at the history around what's going on there actually there were two women that were fighting in the particular church that he's talking about. And those two women were fighting to the point where it was causing disunity throughout the entire church. And so what Paul was dealing with was to say, hey guys, in this church, this body right here, where these women are fighting and it's causing disunity, I tell you what, no women are going to teach here. And it was because these women were in a scuffle about it, basically a big power struggle of who was going to run that church. And he said, I tell you what, none of you are going to do it. And so I don't think that actually applies to everywhere. I think it was just applying to that church. But
like my thing is, like, why is that even in the Bible at all? How does that bring you closer to God?
I think if you understood, he also has done that with men where he said, you're out.
Right.
So I think there are times when Paul would say in a specific church something, and we've, as Christians, and this is where we've probably done you a disservice, is we've looked at that and applied that generally over everyone. And when God never intended that, and that's not what Paul was talking about at that time. Okay. And so I think that we have, as Christians, have done you a disservice in that regard. And that probably was a power play by a man in the church who wanted to make sure that he could do what just Jeff said, or when he said that these things were there to control people. Mm-hmm. I think people use sometimes things in the Bible out of context to control other people.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time. I super appreciated the chat. Gave me a lot to think about. And I guess we're going to transition to the next segment.
Perfect. Are you muted?
I guess I got muted. Yeah, somebody else's job, I think, is to introduce
Cut that. Rewind it. Okay, take it again.
All right. How's it going?
That's good.
Good. I'm really enjoying the chat that you and Kay were having. I tend to take things a little bit different. Take a different approach. I don't like, I guess, necessarily getting into the nitty gritty of exactly what the Bible says. What I typically do is just ask, okay, what's something that we differ on? And in this case, it's really easy. It's, you believe that a God exists and I don't.
Yes.
And my overall objective in this segment is to understand how you got to believe that a God exists, and to discover whether or not the way that you came to believe that a God exists is a way that I could also get there. Okay. So really, it's just a matter of trying to meet in the middle and try to take that approach.
Right. Which is a little bit different from the standpoint of I will openly tell you what I have is a belief, not a no. Mm-hmm. And I think there are some Christians that try to come at you and say, hey, no, I know this to be the case. And as soon as you do that, then I made a positive assertion that I don't know that I'll ever have the evidence that I would be able to demonstrate in a way that would convince you. But I can tell you why I believe what I believe.
Yeah. Right off the bat, this brings up an interesting question.
Yeah.
What do you think, I guess, is the difference between knowing something and belief? I have a couple thoughts on this myself, but I'm interested in how you put it.
For me, knowledge is when you have something evidential that is observable and gets you to a point where it's unreasonable to think something contrary to what you observe. So I think there's something, and knowledge gets to a level where where I guess you would say I have something that's tangible there that I can back things with. I think belief can involve some measure of knowledge, but it's the recognition that there is a step where you get, and I think everyone does this at some point, where you reach the end of what you know, and there's that next step where you're going to believe something that goes beyond, but it can be informed by what you know.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you can know things, and then what you know kind of builds maybe a framework that leads you to a belief.
A belief. That's
okay.
Right.
Awesome. Well, let's so you believe that God exists.
I do.
And what is the confidence level that you would bet yourself if like 100% was like absolute knowledge? Like, if you were to say, I know God exists, and there's nothing I could discover, which would show me, might shift my belief on that. And then 0% would be nothing but questions. In fact, you've investigated perhaps, and there's nowhere that a God could be hiding. Maybe would bet you at a 0%.
Right. I would probably say I'm an 8 or a 9.
8 or 9%?
No, 8 or 9 out of 10. If you were saying that 10 is absolute belief or absolute knowledge, I would say I'm at about an 8 or a 9. But that 9 or 10, getting to those levels, that's still that's a step of faith, and it can be informed by what I know, but at the end of the day, if I'm being intellectually honest, I've never seen God. I've never so I haven't had that experiential, like I know you exist. From as much as I can know, if we understand that what we live in here is actually real.
I'd be like a 9.5 or a 9.
You're like a 9.5. Yeah. Okay. So I acknowledge that.
Awesome.
That there's a step of faith there.
I really appreciate that, because I mean, I'm sure you've heard many people just say like I'm a 10, and then they'll actually say that faith is what gets them to the 10. So it's interesting to hear that you're saying faith gets you to 8 or 9. Is there anything else making that up, or are you saying that you would be like at a 1 or a 2 if it wasn't for faith? No,
I'd say I'd be at an 8 or a 9, and the step of faith is from the 8 to the 10.
Oh, okay.
In my book. And I know people will challenge me and say, okay, well, so what have you observed? What's the evidence? What are those things that get you there? And I mean, there's a lot of things that everything from, like you said, or I think Jeff that was saying there's archaeological evidence that's there that seems to back up some of the things that happened historically in the Bible. That would be a small step there. Because I know there's also a lot of archaeological evidence for a lot of other things as well. But so I look at that. I look at prophetic evidence. I look at statistical probability. I look at from my standpoint, and I know not everyone believes in the same logic that I believe in, but to me, it makes logical sense. I mean, you could see from my conversation with Kay. That where she sees logical illogical fallacies or logical fallacies, I have answers for some of those things, and we actually never even got really in deep to why I believe on some of the things that she thinks are fallacious.
Right. Yeah.
So, and then I have experiential things. I've spent a lot of time in mission fields where I've seen things happen that you just kind of go, okay, yeah, that could have been a coincidence, but gosh, I've had an awful lot of coincidences in my life then.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, yeah. So this brings me, let's try to narrow down maybe out of that, what is the biggest reason that gets you to that 8 or 9 in belief?
The biggest reason for me would probably be the what I see in the world in terms of the nature of man and how he behaves and how that interacts with what the Bible says in terms of what we should see in the way man acts and behaves, and then looking at how man tries to deal with those deficits. And for me, it's looking and saying, how could that fill that deficit? And yet, when I look at the way that I believe the Bible presents it, it seems to make sense to me that that would be the only way that you could fill those deficits.
I guess I want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm trying to figure out, you're at an 8 or 9 that God exists.
Yes.
You're saying that the nature of man and the way that we try to make up the deficits described in the Bible, or the way that we interact as described in the Bible, is that a reason that God exists?
Well, the fact that he in the Bible, it seems to be the only philosophy or way in which this is depicted. Meaning that, like, if I look at whether it's atheism and thinking that man is basically good, or is basically whatever we are, that we are in it for the well-being of each other, and that there's at the heart of most of us is a heart that's basically good. I guess that's you may correct me on that.
No, I guess I'm just trying to understand maybe the connection between the way the Bible describes humanity. And
the Bible describes. How do you think the Bible describes humanity, the nature of man?
I think it's a fantastic collection of very influential literary work, which a lot of Western tradition is based on. Like a lot of our experiences, some of the law, I mean, most of our government is Christian. And so the people who have written our laws throughout our entire history.
So how do you think it depicts the nature of man?
There's a bunch of different depictions of man. I think there are heroes in the story. There are villains.
Okay.
People who harm other people tend to be the villains, right? And people who work for the betterment, within the Bible, people who
within the
work
Bible
for the betterment of God or suffer because God asked them to, they would also be heroes.
What if I told you that the Bible's depiction of man is that all of us are incompatible with perfection, that we're all that all of us at the end of the day are not, there's none of us that are heroes.
I would say that
not relative to God, relative to each other. Yes.
Yeah.
But not relative to him.
I think this is slightly off topic just because I want to make sure that we're continuing to get to the foundation of how you came to believe that God exists. What's that?
Yeah. The foundation of my faith.
All right. So is your faith then that God exists?
Yes.
If you didn't have all of this other stuff, would you have faith that God exists?
Yes.
Okay. So then would you say then that almost all of your belief is founded on faith?
No, I would say, I mean, it's archaeological evidence, it's prophetic evidence, it's statistical probability. I think for me, there's some people that you could probably ask that question and they'd say, oh yeah, here's the one thing that I hang my hat on. Mm-hmm. I don't hang my hat on one thing. I don't think it's smart to hang your hat on one thing. I think it's the combination of all of those different things that leave me with a confidence that gets me to an 8 or 9. And then I say, based on my confidence and all that other stuff, I'm either going to choose to take the next step and say, yes, I'm going to believe that you're there, or I'm going to choose not to. And I choose to believe that he's there.
Would you say it's possible for someone in a different religion to take their holy text in the way that it interprets kind of how humanity works and some of the same experiences that you've had, the things that they observe around them? Would it be possible for someone in a different religion to conclude that their God exists with an 8 or 9 out of 10 confidence?
Absolutely.
In use faith?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think they could. And then it comes down to the law of non-contradiction. Either we're both wrong or one of us is wrong and the other's right. But we both can't be right.
Yeah.
And you know, there are reasons why I believe the Christian faith is correct and why Islam is not, or why Mormonism is not, why Baha'i is not, why you name it, Scientology, whatever it is. There are reasons why I believe that Christianity is correct. which I'm happy to share if you want me to. But
yeah, and I guess I continue to be fascinated by this idea that you've got all this evidence, which somebody, and if you're correct, tell me when I'm wrong, but if people could take some of the same evidences, whether it's archaeological, based on their holy text, and they come to a drastically different belief, a conflicting belief than yours, and the only difference would be your faith is getting you from an 8 to a 10 on this God, and their faith is getting them from an 8 to a 10. Is faith then and I guess you mentioned this before, is faith like a reliable component there? And if you didn't have faith, would you believe that God exists still based on just the evidence?
I would, because I think let's say it this way: my 8 or 9 gets me to a point where I believe that there's a God, but I don't know.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. And even if I said I had a 10, my 10 would still be a belief, not a no. Until I get to heaven, until I die and I see what happens on the other side, I'm never going to be at a no.
It's so interesting,
but neither would someone in science. Until you die, no one knows what's on the other side of death, because none of us have been there.
Well, there's tons of scientists who absolutely believe that God exists, and they don't see a conflict within that at all. So I don't have a problem, I guess, with that. Yeah. I guess I want to know, because we were talking about it's a grouping of the evidence. Is there anything that you could discover which would increase your confidence that God exists from an 8 to a 9 or a 9 to a 9.9? Is there any kind of evidence that you could discover which would actually increase your confidence that God exists?
Well, I mean, if he showed up and walked right next to me, yeah.
How would you know it was God if he was walking right next to you?
If he was walking right next to me, how would I know it was God?
Yeah.
I'd have to observe him for a while, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because the Bible even says that there's a lot of people that show up and say they're God. And he says, watch them, look at their fruit. The interesting thing is, I think it's the hardest part about knowing about God. And it was a place that Kay and I were about to dive into, but we got in a different direction. When I asked her the question about what do you think the purpose of the law is, how would I understand what God is? I mean, if God is really perfect, I've never seen what perfect looks like. And neither of you. I mean, none of us have. We've always seen something that's faulty.
I think my concept of perfection is that I don't think the concept of perfection would exist without us to interpret it. Does that make sense?
Okay. And I would say that if we try to interpret what perfection is, I bet our idea of our ideal of what perfection is would fall short of what perfection is.
Absolutely. I don't disagree with you there.
Yeah.
I bet we have a ton of common ground, and which is why I try to zero in on this, just like the God belief itself, because it sounds like you believe God exists, and it's based on a grouping of evidence. And I'm trying to understand your barrier for entry when it comes to evidence for increasing your belief that God exists seem to be higher than the barrier for entrance for some of this other evidence, where this other evidence could get somebody to believe that a different God exists, but it's not as striking as God standing next to you. For instance, I would have a lot of questions if somebody claiming to be God stood right next to me, told me things about myself I never knew. I'd have a lot of questions.
But have there been people that have known things about other people that you thought they shouldn't know?
Well, there's techniques like cold reading and things like that, but I think you could
or they could have studied your life and that. Yeah. They could have studied up on you before they got to know you.
But there could be, exactly. And there could be techniques that God would know what would convince me, right? If God was next to me, he could convince me. I'm pretty sure of that. So what is your barrier for entry when it comes to evidence that God exists then?
A barrier for entry. I guess I'm trying to understand the question.
What types of evidence can show a person, like can show anybody, like, or what kinds of evidence showed you that God exists? And then what kinds of evidence do you think should be compelling for others?
I mean, in some ways it's so personal, because like you said, God knows what each person needs to convince them. And it comes down to being convinced of it. For me, it's probably on that intellectual side of, I'm trying to tell you exactly why do I believe, what was the biggest thing? For me, it was a recognition of the condition of man seems to be such that we always are screwing up. And even at our best really is not that good. There's always something that's selfish about it. There's always something that's driven to probably some kind of self-gain. I would say this, the best thing I do is probably love my wife, which I love her dearly. And I would say there's probably a selfishness at times in the way that I love her. And I recognize, okay, wait a minute. If there is something that's perfect that's out there, then I even at my best, I fall short of it. And I just I see man in a state where even our best attempts are usually done. And if we look down in the bottom of it, it's really because we thought it would serve us pretty well if we got whatever it was to go our way.
Could a person have some of those same realizations? And thank you for sharing that personal, information. I know it's always like it is a brave thing, and I know you're a pastor, so you're sharing personal stuff all the time.
Well, I'm actually not a pastor.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You know that? Yeah, no, I'm not.
You're putting stuff out there, and you're creating. So in one way or another, in a
I'm
way,
sharing something personal. I get you.
So, could somebody have those same feelings? For instance, like I love my parents. All these kinds of things. Could somebody experience some of those same things, have those same realizations about how humanity works, how humans interact with each other,
without
and
a God
still
concept?
and still just remain, when it comes to the God question, remain in the same place? I suppose, what do you feel is the connection between recognizing humanity's imperfection and a God existing? Because it's beautiful. I think about people in a lot of the same way.
Yeah. I guess that normally when people, if you look at philosophies, normally people will say either, hey, I have a misconception about myself, and actually I'm divine underneath it all. Or there's a sense that, hey, if I work harder at this thing, I can make myself better. And if you look historically at it, we don't seem to appear to have the divine at the heart of who we are, or we certainly wouldn't do the things that we do to each other consistently, even good people supposedly doing things. And then if we are really working hard at this thing, it seems like we're just complete failures at it, at really being good to each other. And the fact that the Bible says that the heart of man is desperately sick, who can understand it? The intent of man's heart is evil from his youth. And the fact that it lays out and says, hey, look, you're going to try to work at this thing. I'm telling you, you're not going to get there. And I'm telling you, the reason is because there's a problem with the state of who you are down deep. That resonates with me.
Yeah. I think I can definitely recognize and empathize with the idea that people perhaps need some type of motivation, whether that's like extrinsic motivation or intrinsic, or maybe they just recognize, like, I want to be good to people, but then there's contradictions in the way that we act, right?
Yes.
Maybe there's like an awkward interaction and you accidentally do something bad. That's just because I'm human.
Yeah.
I guess it's beautiful language, and I hate to kind of sound like a broken record, but I still don't quite see the connection between this creator being or consciousness that interacts with my life and communicates with us,
Right.
and recognizing that people are sometimes, we suck at being good to each other.
We do.
And so
Let me say, remember I said that was, I think you're wanting me to boil it down and say, is that the like one thing, like that's my biggest thing? I would say that's not my biggest thing, but it's a piece of the puzzle. What's another big one? Well, I have a hard time when most science believes that things came from nothing, that there was a beginning and there was nothing at one point. How does something come from nothing?
Awesome.
How does the living come from the non-living?
Yeah, those are beautiful questions, and I'd love to spend like 2 or 3 hours. I will plug one of my favorite websites that help address that, which is a Christian website.
Yeah.
It's called biologos.org.
Okay, I've heard
And
of it.
Oh, you've heard of Biologos? Okay.
Yes.
I mean, I was reading through it. I learned things about the Bible. I was like, man, I thought I knew this creation story. I thought I knew this interpretation of events. And it brought up a whole bunch of different things. But with that,
tell me this: does Biologos believe in evolution?
They present some different ways. Yes, they do. They accept evolution, and they present some different ways that it could be compatible with the Bible, with scriptural evidence. So it's pretty neat. I
have a whole argument about why I think the Bible actually presents evolution.
There you go. Yeah, Biologos might be your way to go to.
But I could also see it the other way. Yeah. So,
but maybe check that out, because that you may find some things in common with that website, and I always point people in that direction. But with that,
great.
Greg, no, I gotta go. Thank you so much for the conversation.
Yeah.
What's up, Greg?
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing good.
They let you back. I guess you let yourself back.
They let me back in. It's dangerous. No, but I appreciate your, not just the conversations, but your demeanor, and the way you communicate, and the way you talk to us heathens. And I say it is funny, but it's also refreshing for us, because a lot of times it's we're just devil worshipers going to hell, and we're just bad human beings. So when we do get to talk to somebody that we disagree with, but we can disagree respectfully, and it be cordial, it is a breath of fresh air. So thank you for that. I do just have a couple questions here, and then we'll go into Q&A. Real quick, for those in the chat room, thanks for hanging out. We've had a great crowd so far. Lots of good conversation going on in there. And if you want, we're getting ready to talk to the Murdershed Steve, in the Q&A section here in a minute. So get your questions in there. And the easiest way to make sure that those are seen and those questions get asked is to use the super chat function. It is activated at the bottom of the chat room, and we'll make sure that those get asked. But what we ask to make it easy is make sure you tag whoever the question is directed towards. So if it is going to Greg, make sure you say this question is for Greg, so on and so forth. If you have a question for one of the part of the TART panel, just make sure you single it out. But Greg, there's a couple things that stick out without going all the way back to the beginning and rehashing everything. There's a couple things you said that stuck out to me that have kind of led to these questions. One, you said that you have not spoken to or seen God. Like you and I are talking right now, even though it's through the internet, we're still having this conversation. You haven't had those type of experiences. And there's there's not a physical evidence that we can point to say that this is this is how we know that this God exists, the Bible God. So why then, minus those things, why do you choose to believe then? Because then at that point, to me, it does kind of become a choice. And usually I don't believe that, but when I hear somebody say I don't have I don't have these experiences, these physical, tangible experiences, but yet I still believe, to me, that's a decision to buy into that. So why would that be?
Right. And I think little bit of a different characterization. I said I don't see him like I see you. It's not to say that I don't feel like I have conversations with him. And I know some would say, well, is that just you talking with your conscience and weaving things together, thinking for yourself?
Well,
And to me, I think
if we can, for you and I to get clarity there, then have you had an audible conversation like you and I are having right now with?
Yeah, no. I mean, it's not audible. It's something that is in my head, but for me, and again, I could be wrong, but I'll tell you that the kinds of discussions that I have in my head oftentimes lead me in completely different directions than I would have ever thought, and to different places than I have thought in the past. And I can give you examples, but to me, it's like having. I honestly think I'm having a conversation with God almost all the time.
Okay, so but would we agree then? And just like you said, and you use this term earlier, and I do appreciate it, being intellectually honest.
Honest, yeah.
Would you not then concede that that's mostly anecdotal?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Or I mean, but at the same time, is it possible that it's real? It could be real. And that's where I start to lean then on other aspects to say, hey, wait a minute, how is that? If I was only basing it on what I thought was going on in a conversation in my head, I'd start having question marks more. But I think there's a plethora of things that I lean on that lead me to say, I may not know, but I'm convinced enough that I would place my trust in that thing.
The reason I ask those things, and I'd push back on that, is well, first, kind of the I guess the bullet, or not the bullet point, the sub point or sub question to that is, if you, and you said this several times, and I was actually very grateful to hear you say this, because I tell Christians all the time, there's a reason you're called a believer and not a knower.
Yeah,
there's the reason, and I think you may be the first believer to say that without me bringing it up. So
well, if you're being intellectually honest,
absolutely,
you got to say that that's what I am. I'm a believer.
So knowing that, and you and I sharing that understanding, and myself being a former believer of 30 plus years, I do hold strong to that there's a reason that if I were still a Christian, I would be a believer and not a knower, because I don't absolutely know that this thing is real. Like you said, I could be wrong. So
Yes.
that, all of that said, if it's not a, Greg, if it's not a no, if it's not a knowledge, and we don't know it to be absolute truth,
Yes.
would it not be reckless or irresponsible to then encourage people to put their entire life and invest their entire life into something that even yourself you don't know,
Right.
you believe? Wouldn't that be irresponsible or reckless to try to convince other people to do this when you yourself don't even know that it is an absolute truth?
Well, it would be if in presenting what I do, I'm forcing them to believe what I believe. If I'm presenting, here's the case for why I believe what I believe, and the choice is up to you whether or not you choose to believe it or not. And it comes down to whether or not you've been convinced by either whatever I'm saying, or quite frankly, God has got to convince you, not me. Then I think it would be reckless for me to force someone to live.
But to that point, Greg, I don't. Again, if people are being intellectually honest, I don't think anybody can actually make a claim and then support the claim with evidence that they've been convinced by a God. I don't think anybody can show that and show it to be demonstratable, that we can lay this out and show that you are actually convinced by a God. And if there's anybody out there,
I believe. Yeah. I understand. From my belief system, I believe that God convinces me. So I believe it was His work, not all the other stuff. I mean, He used the other stuff to convince me. But I understand where you're coming from. If you're saying that is it reckless for me to
Not just you,
insist that someone else?
any, just so we're clear, not just you, any believer.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Do you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that matter was eternal?
Here's what I do know is I don't know.
Okay. So, but you want to convince me that there was no God, that in fact matter just existed, and if you say no, I don't really want to convince you of that. One, I would say, are you being intellectually honest from the standpoint of, are you trying to convince me through the questions that you're asking me about whether or not I'm convinced about God? Is it that you're getting me to try to question my faith?
No, not
Okay.
not at all.
Okay.
What I'm trying to get to and I'll just speak for me. I always try to make this as clear as I can. I'm never going to speak for other atheists.
Okay.
I don't know what other people's intentions are, what they want at the end of a show or a conversation. For me, as a former believer, I truly want to know the true things, and I want to run away from the untrue things.
Untrue things. Okay, then we're on the same page.
Yeah, and so when I ask those questions, because to me, my current stance is not just for you, Greg, but for any and every believer, until someone can show that this is can be demonstratable, it can be observable and repeatable, and when we know that there's truth there's evidence there, I do find it reckless, and I do find it irresponsible that people would try to give people this quote unquote gospel or good news message that really at the end of the day, we don't have substance to support it. We just have belief. And I don't want to base my life on just believing and hoping things are real. I want to know things are real.
So what do you know is real?
I know we're having this conversation right now.
Okay. Beyond that, what do you know is real?
I know right now in my house, I have all my kids, my wife are here. There's a lot of things that in, not to steal from T-Jump lately, and I think therefore I am, like, I know my reality. I know where I sit. I know what I'm doing. I know what's going on.
And I guess when I ask the question about what do you know is real, because really what we're asking about is, what do I know is real about the afterlife when I die? What happens after that?
Well, but can I tell you that
really, our beliefs come down to what do I think is going to happen after I die? I mean, outside of that, we can both live in well-being with each other, and basically say, I want to look out for your best interest. You look out for my best interest. If we both do that, we're probably both going to achieve our best interests, or be more likely to do that.
I think I understand what you're saying, but I'll tell you, the afterlife conversation is completely separate for me. I'm not even even engaged in this. I wasn't even thinking about heaven, hell, eternity. What I'm thinking about is people living their everyday lives and under this, whether it's the dogma, the control, or perhaps a complete misguidance. They live their whole life under this premise that I believe that this thing, or I hope this thing is real. And then what if they wasted their entire life and none of it's real? They never got to be authentic. They never got to be themselves because they had to live under this guise of this belief. That's my concern, because I don't believe there's an eternity. I believe we're going to go right back to where we were before we were born, which is we don't know anything about anything. We're back to dirt, dust, whatever you want to call it. But I do want to ask kind of offshoot that one more question before we go into Q&A. And Greg, I would actually love to get you back on here in the near future. That way we don't forget about these things.
Sure,
and
sure.
we can dig in a little more. Why? I know you were born here in the States. I was born here in the States.
Yes.
And a lot of these things are at the end of the day going to be geographically based. So being a believer, not a knower, which most theists should, I hope, again, if they're being honest, hold that position that they don't emphatically know. Why why is your belief, why is your faith, why is your God better than the one that if I go to India or if I go to Iraq or wherever else, why did you happen to stumble upon the right God just because you were born in the States? But all the rest of them, if they don't ever get to know Jesus and they die, they whatever eternity looks. Christians agree and disagree, but let's say hell. They go to hell for not finding the right God. Like why have faith in any of that? Why believe in any of that?
Right. One, I think that there are people from all over the world that come to know Christ, not just in the States. Well,
what I meant by that, just for clarity, is it's statistically proven. Religions are regionally based. And that doesn't mean that other people can't find out about Jesus or find out about Muhammad or Allah or find out about Krishna. Or, you can still find those things out, but it is heavily dominated by the region that you are born into and the family you're born into and raised in.
Right. And so I guess two things. One, I guess would be the question, okay, what if I'm living in the Amazon, I'm in an Indian tribe, and I never hear about the name of Jesus, and yet I'm supposed to believe in Jesus or I can't be saved? That would be, I guess, one aspect of your question. I think there's a good answer for that. Second would be, hey, wait a minute, I've been predisposed to believe in Muhammad and all these others, and whereas you were predisposed to believe in Christ. So how can I say that my belief is more valid than their belief? I think, why do I think, do we have time for this? I don't even know how much time we have.
You're good. Go ahead and finish your question, then I'm going to bring Stephen.
If I were to say, why do I believe in Christianity versus Islam or Jehovah's Witness or Mormon faith or any of the other faiths that kind of have a Judeo-Christian feel to them or that kind of a faith, is that every one of those is based on, hey, look, eventually I've got to do enough good things to offset my bad things, or I've got to do enough works to equal and make things right with God. If I'm talking about an Eastern faith, Hinduism, Buddhism, I'm talking about the divine already being inside of me. And I think both of those routes go against what we would observe in the evidence of the divine is not in all of us, because we all stumble and fall and do all the wrong things most of the time. We probably do more bad things than we do good things, most of us, if you're comparing yourself to perfection. And I think that the Christian faith is the only one that says, hey, wait, you're a broken thing. Let me help you. I want to fix you. So I think it's unique. And that's part of the reason why I think that way. If I'm talking about the person that's on the Amazon, look no further than, I think it's Revelation 7:9. It says that in the end, there will be a multitude that will stand before God in heaven, and they will come from, and the Bible says, every tribe, every nation, every people, every language. I would tell you that there's no tribe you can find, even if they haven't heard of Christ, from which there won't be someone that's saved there. And that would mean that it's probably because God's a merciful and loving God, and he's not looking to hold people out. He's looking to bring people in. And so if that person responded to some element that they had received or that they saw, but they never knew Jesus, God probably in his omniscience knows what that person would have done had they heard all the truth, whether or not they would have responded. And he responds to that person as if they did respond to him, because he knows what they would have done in the presence of that knowledge. And there's proof of it because of what they responded to that they were given. That would be my answer to that. I think there's going to be a lot more people. There may be more people in heaven than we think, even though there may be less than some people think too. So,
yeah, I don't believe any of us are going to be there. But
let me say, hey, and if we ended up there, there's a part of me that said I'd almost that would be okay from this standpoint. I don't want anyone to end up in hell. There's almost a part of me that wishes that it's not right. But if there's a chance that it could be, and I believe that there is, then I think I would be in the wrong for not at least bringing it up and saying, hey, I think this is a possibility. Go and think about it. And if you are convinced by it, as I've been convinced by it, then here's the way the Bible says that you can overcome that. If you aren't convinced by it, it's up to you. It's between you and God. I'm not going to force you. So.
Okay. Yeah. And there's a couple different can of worms that we could pop open there, but I want to respect the time, but I definitely do want to, I'll reach out to you afterwards and we'll get another time and try to spread the times out a little more. That way we can really get in, a little deeper dialogue on those. But like I told you coming into it, the first episode when we have a guest on, we try to get to know you, kind of hit a few different topics, and then we can go from there. But Greg, again, thank you for so much for being on. Have you watched one of our episodes from top to bottom?
I think I've watched maybe one or two. Okay. I don't know if I'd say I got all the way through it because I run out of time. I got to move on to other things. But yeah.
Have you ever been inside of a murder shed before?
I've never. No, I don't even know what that is.
Well, hello everybody. Actually, I need Oz for this one. I need Oz's help here. I've got hey, how's it going, Oz?
What's up, buddy?
Not much, man. So I've got a question for you, and I want to know if you have any knowledge on this. Are you aware of why we really need that separation of church and state, and why we can't have the 10 Commandments outside of the courthouse?
I feel like no.
Fair enough. The answer is that if you post "thou shalt not steal," "thou shalt not lie," and "thou shalt not commit adultery," it creates a hostile work environment for politicians.
That's one of my favorite ones yet. That's one of my favorite ones yet, Steve. Good job.
And that is actually a joke from my real father that led me to serial killer tendencies.
All right, well, everybody, Murdershed Steve.
Hey, how's it going, Greg?
That's good.
Good.
That was a good
Kay,
joke.
Hey, Ben.
Hi.
Are we having fun yet? Welcome to the Murdershed.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you know what, Oz? I've got a couple of questions for Oz right off the bat, and I love that he took himself off screen. Right, but yeah, there he is. Love it. So Eddie Kroom is curious. This one is directed at you, Oz. We confirmed it. Why do you always expect an experience, and why must one need a feeling to believe?
Oh, no. I don't want to feel something. I don't. No, I want evidence. I don't want a feeling.
I agree.
As I always say, inspect what you expect.
Ooh.
Feelings
That's
have
deep.
historically been a poor barometer for truth.
Facts over feelings. Facts over feelings.
Oh,
For
God.
real.
Well,
And-
if MSS here did everything he felt like he should do.
I have no idea. Just Jeff, I have no idea what you're talking about. And speaking of the weaselly faced troll,
Oh shit!
we've got a question for Oz. One other question for Oz here. Do you think that a blazer makes you look less or more homeless?
Let's see.
You know what I can say about that is, regardless of the blazer, you just look hopeless.
Fuck you guys. I'm leaving.
See you later, Oz. Love you.
That was easy.
All righty. Now we have some more serious questions. That was a fun little romp. And I'm sure that we will all endure the wrath later. So, Al Biddy has a question. Isaiah 45:7 says, I, God, created evil. So understanding the effects of evil, why is God worthy of worship and not a God that doesn't claim to have created evil, which would definitely be moral?
Great question.
Definitively.
It is in my contract to mispronounce at least one word during Q&A.
Oh,
so
okay.
I've fulfilled my contract.
Got
the
it.
rest are just going to be for fun.
Noted.
Is that for me?
So, Greg, I think this one's directed towards you.
I
Yeah.
imagine so. Interesting. Okay, so Isaiah 45:7. It's interesting when you read the whole story and what's going on there. God is actually speaking about a specific situation. He's speaking about a people that has come against the children of Israel, and what he's saying is, in this instance, when calamity comes against your nation, as you've been attacking my nation, I want you to know something. The calamity is not happening just as something naturally that's happening. I want you to understand that when calamity comes your way, it's not natural. It's me. I'm doing this to you. And he's not saying that he created all evil. He's saying that for this nation group, as they are acting against Israel, he wants them to understand that right now, as this is transpiring, everything that seems evil that's happening to you, don't think it's coming from any other source than me, because I am bringing this against you. But so I think it's important to note that that section of scripture is not talking in general and saying that God has created all evil. He's actually saying that for this nation, I've created it for you. And it's actually a word that doesn't mean evil. It means calamity. I'm bringing all the calamity that's going to come. It's going to come against you, and know the source. It's me.
Al-Bidi speaks Hebrew.
Good. I'd love to hear her thoughts about that then. That's great.
I'm sure that we can find a way to arrange that, perhaps.
Yeah, we can talk more about that, because I think that's if God is a creator of evil, then when God says that he can do no evil, it would be contrary and contradictory to his nature.
Do you think that Bible verse is maybe misleading and confusing?
I think it's misleading and confusing when you read it out and don't read the whole context of it. If you read the whole context, I think it stands out pretty well to say that it's actually him bringing it against a specific people group. And he tells you the reason why. And he tells you the reason why. Yeah, that text. Yeah,
I'll tell you.
Context does mean a lot.
Well, and then the additional thing to that is bringing calamity, which is, for those who don't know, I Googled it, an event causing great often sudden damage or distress, a disaster.
Yeah.
Right? So we're saying, to me, that one seems to be interfering with people's free will, and two also seems evil in a sense that you're purposefully, no matter what the reason is, so going against free will, you're just causing a disaster.
There might be a better way to do it, I guess. I think is what.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Unless your purpose is actually to destroy those, because it's a judgment at that time. Yeah, and at that point, you have to ask whether or not if is the judgment a just one. Because if he's a perfect God and he's perfectly just in what he does, and his judgment is to destroy, and it's a perfectly just judgment, then how can you come against that? It'd be like saying that someone stole from someone else, and hey, it's not just for us to put that person in prison.
So I just have a question with things like the flood, Sodom, Gomorrah, the children of Egypt.
Yes.
Those punishments that were handed out, do you think that those fit the crime, so to speak? Like the people that
I have a different
flood. Do you think that was?
I hesitate from the standpoint of I have a different interpretation or a different thought of what's happening with the flood of Noah than some Christians do. So we could delve into that one maybe a little later. But with Egypt, yes, I think it was that you've got a nation and a nation's leader that is basically threatening the destruction of a people group, Israel, that if that people group is actually destroyed, then you lose the bridge between the beginning of sinful man and the Messiah that would save all of mankind. If Israel's wiped out, then it's not just that Egypt is in threat of destruction. It's that all mankind is in threat of destruction, and not just destruction on earth. It's an eternity in hell that they could all face if we don't get to the Messiah. So
do you think
it's
that,
triage? In some ways, you could look at it as God is doing triage here.
Right. So do you think so? If God's plan is threatened, so to speak, or if human beings' salvation is threatened, him intervening is to stop that from happening is just judgment.
Yes.
So why would God not stop Satan?
Or the Holocaust?
Because Satan did probably even worse than any human on earth. He did anything worse than killing babies or stopping anything else. And he is the reason for the fall of all man. Why would he be allowed to continue to live? But the people in Sodom and Gomorrah were killed for just being sexually impure.
Got it. Great question. I guess you have to. I guess the question is then, why didn't God just throw Satan into hell immediately after the rebellion? Why did he allow him to still be on the earth and still be there? And I think the answer comes in the name change from the angel of light to Satan, meaning the accuser. I think God brought an accusation against God, and God, all that happens with mankind is not about mankind. I think it's actually about God answering the accusation of Satan, which was that you're not God, and if you're not God, then you don't have authority to condemn us if you don't. And how he proved his evidence for that was that you can't be perfectly loving and perfectly just at the same time. So he creates man and goes all the way to the cross, because at the cross is where he proves he can be perfectly loving and perfectly just at the same time.
I think the reason,
the
reason that Satan hasn't been destroyed and the reason that we still see this going on today is much like the Tom and Jerry cartoon. Once Tom catches Jerry, the story's over. So if Satan is destroyed, the story's done. And that's just my personal interpretation of it reading it as a story.
Right.
I don't want to get off track. I know Steve's got more questions.
And we've got more questions to get to. So Jeff, if you want any more questions during the Q&A section, you can just go ahead.
That was all my questions. I'm done.
No. You can just go ahead and super chat them, okay? So I got a question here from Pasta Mike real quick. Yeah. Question for Murdershed Steve. Why are serial killers always so damn sexy looking? And I got to tell you, serial killing 101, got to be charming. However you do that is however you do it, but you got to be charming. That's definitely key. So we had to get that question out of the way for sure. Now, I have a question from Ben G. And actually, if you want, I'll let you ask it, Ben.
You're muted.
Muted. Hey, this kind of comes up with a lot of the. I'm sure you're aware with the Pascal's wager. It's like, even if God didn't exist, this is still a worthy life. It's still worth living as a Christian. So I said, aren't you basing many of your thoughts, behaviors, and votes, which influence other people, on your faith? Isn't that a big gamble if we don't have a good reason to think God exists?
I guess I'm trying to understand what the big gamble would be.
The big gamble,
because if I'm living out the faith that I have, it says that I'm supposed to look not only to my own interest, but also to the interests of others. Consider others' interests better than yourselves. So if from an atheist standpoint, I'm living a life of looking out for the well-being of others, then my faith also challenges me and says I should live for the well-being of others as well.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Can I give you an example that I'm not sure of your stance on it?
Yes.
Here's what I consider to be an easy one.
Yes.
Gay marriage.
Yes.
That's perfectly okay and not a sin in your view.
No, I think it's a sin.
Okay.
But I also don't think that I can dictate how that person lives. I think that's an issue that those two people have to deal with God about.
Would you vote against gay marriage given the opportunity?
Would I vote against gay marriage given the opportunity? No. And here's the reason why. Because we live in a democracy, not a theocracy. If God was the ruler and he was dictating the way things should be, then he has every right to do that. But I live in a nation where I've got to look out for everyone's rights, because there may come an issue at some point where I would hope that a homosexual person would say, wait a minute, those people's rights are being violated. And I would hope that they would vote in favor of me being able to have my rights in this democracy.
Sure. And I guess part of the concern is, would you recognize, and it is much deeper than just voting, right? That your behaviors, like whether or not what you're doing with your Sundays, if you're donating a significant amount of money to keep a church building up that has a couple thousand people, whereas you could be funding a community center for thousands of people.
Yes.
So there's a lot more to it just in those. To me, that the gay marriage thing is a bare bones. And I think there's still issues just in believing that somebody is flawed for
Right.
for having gay sex, or sex before marriage, things about marriage. There's all these things that we kind of get into some muddy territory. And I just I respect your view that your vote would not be based on that. But I think it does go a lot deeper for me.
I agree. And let me say, I've had numerous friends that were homosexual that have told me that my stance and the way I deal with that is very different than they may have experienced with other Christians. And part of that is a recognition that ultimately how someone lives their life, their lifestyle, I mean, they're going to live their life the way that they are convicted or convinced is what's best for them. And if just because I think that God is saying that is not the best way for that person to live, that they aren't convinced of that at this point, and I can't force that conviction on them. If there's a God, I'm going to let God be the one that convinces them of that. And I'm going to leave that in his hands. It's not up to me to do that. Well, what it's up to me to do is to love that person regardless. So,
as a Christian, I got to say, as you being a Christian, I got to say, I appreciate your stance on that. That you would rather not limit people's freedoms than, tell them how to live their lives.
Right. Now, and don't get me wrong. I would, in those conversations, the folks that are my friends that are homosexuals understand where I stand. And that I think that there's a reason why this is not best for them, but they also know that I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, and when push comes to shove, I'm there to love them regardless. And they've seen that in the way that I live my life towards them, so they know that I love them, even if I disagree with something they hold to so strong.
Sure. I got a question from Simply Secular. Thanks, Ben, for fielding that question. Greg, is it ethical to sell people medical cures without reasonable evidence simply because someone took it and recovered from that ailment and believes it to have helped them?
Is it ethical to sell them a cure without evidence? I would say that if you're going to have a medical cure, and I come from a medical background, just to let you know, I'm 27 years in neuroscience. I would say that you wouldn't have a medical cure that you would sell to someone unless you did have evidence of it. And so the question is, do I have evidence that, if you're translating this over into my religious belief, do I feel like I have evidence of that? I do. And so therefore, I'm not selling someone something that I don't believe in. So, yeah.
I've got actually a follow-up question. You said that you've been in neuroscience for 27 years.
Yes.
That's fantastic. The brain is very fascinating to me. Has that brought up any questions about the existence of a soul to you?
No, not really, to be honest. Yeah. No.
Listen, Steve, every doctor knows the soul is located under the liver.
Oh, down here.
Not in the brain.
I've been looking in the
Not
wrong
in the
place. Well, thanks, Jeff.
I heard that there's this gap between your pelvic bone and like that skin just right at the bottom of your body. You know what I'm talking about?
The gooch.
Yeah,
The gooch.
there's like a space inside the body. Is that where the soul is?
Here I am. Sitting here thinking that like the experience that I have is and like the things that I see and all that kind of stuff are kind of emergent properties of the brain, but it turns out it's under the liver.
I have a pretty interesting book that I just read that's got some human errors in it. It's called Human Errors, and it talks about all the like crappy parts about our bodies. And there's a neuroscientist that's mentioned in there with some stuff.
Awesome.
I wanted to respond to Al Biddy's in there. Al Biddy, do you know who Ben Carson is? And we'll just leave that at that if you need to Google Ben Carson, because he's a brain surgeon who is very ardent in his faith.
Oh yeah.
But I think that a lot of people, because I have like my personal doctor that I use, love the guy, fantastic doctor, no issues, has Bibles in the waiting room, has, you know, a mural of the Last Supper in the exam rooms. And I hate that he says this, but he does it all the time. And he'll be like, here's the medication I'm prescribing to you, and God's grace, it'll work fine. And I'm like, I don't want God's grace. You know, the medication works. Like, you know, that's why you're prescribing it to me. And the trials that go through a prescription getting to my face is very exact. It's very, you know, structured. And there's a way to make sure that it's going to work, because we wouldn't want to kill somebody.
Right.
So why wouldn't we apply that same standard of restriction to my soul and my eternity to make sure that we have the correct procedure and the right prescription to make sure I go to the right place?
Right.
Well, and I'll tell you what, we're about to allow just Jeff to get into his weaselly face.
That was my question. That was the only one. That was it.
Well, you're about to have a whole thing, so you enjoy that. Thanks for stopping by the Murdershed, where answers get questioned.
Looking for a new and challenging opportunity? Do you have previous landscaping, mortuary, or medical experience? Are you available to work flexible hours, including nights and weekends? Are you ready to get involved in a business where you can simply make a killing? If you answered yes to these questions, then the Murdershed Steve Intern Program wants to hear from you. Registration for the 2021 season is now underway. Contact us today for an information package to get you started. Many valuable perks are available for those willing to reach out and grab them. Qualified participants must agree to have street epistemology applied to anything they say.
Oh, now I'm the big one.
Oh.
Ooh.
So
Hold on, I gotta make sure we don't get copyright striked. I gotta move my TV out of the frame.
So backstage, asked Greg if he had a few more minutes to hang out, and he said yes. So thank you for that, Greg. And there's a few conversations that that had kind of started and had to abruptly stop. So I don't want to impede any of that. So Jeff, I know you had a specific question or two. I don't know if you got to ask those or not.
I did. Yeah, I think the problem of evil thing is one that I tangle with in thinking, like, if God is all powerful,
Yes,
and can do anything and creates logic, I don't understand why Satan is allowed to get away with his atrocities, which were much worse than humans, and human are punished almost immediately in some cases for refusing to impregnate their dead brother's wife. When they're eaten by a lion, you make fun of bald people, you get killed. But Satan can deceive the entire human race, and he's still allowed power today to deceive us. It's odd to me.
right.
Right. So I want to allow those conversations to take place. So it's that, and then I know Kay and Greg both wanted to continue that conversation. So you guys will have a few minutes there too. So I'll let you guys get into it, and the floor is yours.
Okay. Good. I don't know what you want me to deal with first.
I mean, whatever. I mean,
Where do you want me to go
that's kind of a rhetorical question. I'm not really seeking you to make ends of that. It's just when I think about that problem, it doesn't make sense to me from a logical standpoint. It does make sense to me though in a story format. Like if I'm telling a story and I need to have this continuation, I need to have a protagonist and I need to have that continue through the story. But logically, it just doesn't make sense why Satan is allowed special privilege in many cases to exist, and humans are damned to be destroyed and instantly for making fun of a bald guy, in there. And then I think about like Kay has children, and you know, I have a niece, and I have young, and like and I don't know if you have children, but like there's nothing that Kay's child, and she did this earlier, there's nothing that Kay's child could do to where Kay would say, yeah, I think you should spend eternity in hell. Like there's nothing she could do. So it's weird to me that that kind of love extends to her children, but the God of the Bible does not extend that love to his children.
Right. It's like the exercising of the free will that he supposedly gave us. Once they exercise that free will, then they're punished for it right there on the spot on earth, versus having them be punished for it the regular way of like dying and being judged in death or after death or on Judgment Day. And I'll add real quick, it's interesting because I've had these questions for so long.
Yeah.
And I've heard so many answers. I mean, when I was really struggling with my faith and going through my official faith crisis, right? I was calling pastors anonymously that were across the country just because I wanted to get different insights on all these questions I have. And I never got a satisfying answer. So I'm left there with questions that are almost unanswerable. I can't say that they are unanswerable, but that's how it feels. I don't know if anyone else can relate to that, but
I don't know if they wanted to answer that, if they felt that same way. I'm sure everyone has, to be honest with you, all of you. If you've walked away and said Christianity, I can't believe it. That's probably one of the big questions. And I hate to say this because I sound condemning sometimes when I speak of other Christian pastors or whatever. I hate to say it, but I think it's because oftentimes they're all trained by the same people. They've all gone and they've read the same commentaries, and so they've been trained back that this is the way you answer that question. And quite frankly, I find I went through the same crisis that you did, where I started going, okay, wait a minute, this doesn't seem to make sense. And so, but instead of going and talking to commentaries about it, I decided, let me go talk to God about it. And so I started just having conversations with him. And I know y'all probably don't think I was having a conversation with anyone other than inside my head. But I certainly came to a different conclusion than a lot of people have. And part of the thing is if I'm taking if I'm a loving person and I would never do this to my own children, how in the world would a loving God, if he's really supposed to be perfectly loving, how could he do that to any of the rest of us? I think part of it is that we're looking at from human perspective. You and I are both flawed. We both have done stupid.
Yourself.
Well, all of us have done something wrong in our life. We can all look at it as someone who says, I've screwed up, and therefore when I see my child screwing up, I go, gosh, I can remember a time when I did the same. And there's almost a sense of, wait a minute, I can almost show more empathy and sympathetic towards this. Remember I said that everything with God's a little different because his nature is perfect. I think the reason people, I think, get, and this is the way it's taught to most people that are, when you're growing up in church, it's, well, God, he sees us doing wrong, and so he punishes us. And that's what hell is about punishing us. I think the really what the Bible presents to us is that we, when we fall, are in a state that is incompatible with who he is. And he can't help who he is. He's perfect. And therefore anything that's imperfect is incompatible with that which is perfect. And so if you can't be with him, where else can you be? The only other place to be when you're dealing with an omnipresent God is the one place where he says, okay, then I just won't be in this place. If you're incompatible with me and you are an eternal being, because our spirits, the Bible says, are eternal, then there's only one place for me to go if I'm not going to be in his presence. And that's the place where he's not. And that's what hell is. So it's not that God is actually saying, I love you so much, I love you, but I'm going to send you to this place. It's that I love you and I wish I could bring you into my presence, but you're not compatible with me.
Can I draw an analogy here?
Yeah.
Would you say that there's a lot of behaviors that are inherently wrong, but that are natural to human?
A fallen human, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And all humans would be fallen, right?
Absolutely.
Everybody. Okay, excellent. Say I had a child 3 or 4 years old, and I told my child, listen, you're going to grow another inch, right, in the next few years. And
Yes.
for every time that I catch that you've grown, I'm going to send you to your bedroom for a year. And you're not going to be able to come out of that bedroom because I don't want you in my presence because you have grown an inch. And so it's something that's natural to them. They can't control it.
Yeah.
And yet I'm not punishing them. Like I'm not hitting them. I may not even say anything harsh to them. I'm just sending them out of my presence for a year.
Yes.
Right. Yet it's natural that they do that. Should a person be punished in any way for something that they can't control, such as growing like an inch?
Or belief.
Or finding that someone is attractive whom you're not married to?
It depends on if if this growing an inch is something that makes you incompatible with living with that other being.
Sure.
Yeah, if it makes you
I gotta buy new
incompatible.
clothes and new shoes. I don't have the money for it. It's incompatible.
Yeah, but you're still dealing with his nature, and his nature is one of perfection and holiness. And and all he's saying, and we didn't get into this because I told you that what is the purpose of the law, and we were talking about what it is a standard of how to live. The Bible actually presents that's not really what the law is about. The law is that I can't explain to you what perfection is. I can't tell you what it is to be me. And so what I'm going to show you is that you aren't me, that you aren't perfect. So if I present you with a law, the law is basically if you fail it once, you fail the whole thing. All he's showing you is that at some point, there's a point where you fall outside of what is his good, perfect, and pleasing will. And if you're outside of that, because his nature is perfection, it means you're incompatible with him. So he's showing you with the law, it's not an arbitrary set of rules to say, hey, live this way or else. It's that I am this way, and if you aren't my way, you can't be with me. And so since you can't know what I am, I'm going to show you that you're not me. You're not perfect. And then I'm going to say, but guess what? I love you so much now that I'm going to do what it takes to help you overcome this imperfection and make it so that you can be right with me. And that's all the Bible is about.
Into the whole shebang is why even create us. It's like if I leave a glass of soda right on the edge of one of my daughter's toys, and she's 3, by the way.
It's already broken.
She's playing in her room, and I put it there. I made the soda, I put it in the cup, and I placed it where she is, and she inevitably will knock it over. I can't, it's my fault. I put it there. I'm the one that did that. She is 3, and I know that she's not perfect. She can't live up to my standards of being not clumsy and know everything that I know about how soda will stain the carpet and how shouldn't be on the edge there. I can't.
What if we make let's say your daughter is the only person on the planet. Okay. And you tell her like, hey, don't eat from this tree. But then you decide to put the tree in your backyard next to her with fruit on it and then tell her not to eat from that tree. She doesn't know right from wrong. What is she going to do?
Probably.
And then after she does it, you punish her and every single human that exists from that point forward.
Awesome. I mean, it's all great. I understand these.
Did you see like I can't?
So then I have thought about it. I have thought about it.
That's just how I feel. And I can't.
Understand?
And then on top of that, just the other logical fallacies of the omnimax being in general and how the world is today. And of course, with Satan, and you throw into all that, then you throw in, a flawed book that was canonized in a way that doesn't make sense, but it's supposed to be the thing that saves your soul. And it doesn't make any sense I just
let me ask you this: does it make sense from the standpoint of you're not perfect, you're not compatible with him? There's no way for you to make yourself perfect or compatible with him, but God steps in and says, I will do what it takes to make you compatible with me. And all you have to do is just say, yes, will you make what your remedy is that you know to be the only remedy that will work because you are omniscient? He says, I make this remedy available to you, and all you have to do is accept it and say, yes, will you make that remedy count for me? And he says, if you will say yes to that, he'll make that remedy count for you, in which case you're compatible with him. Does that make sense?
No, because if I just feel like I could do that better than God, because I wouldn't have to do this multi-step process. Because why would he send himself, who is his son, to save all of us from himself? So that way we can.
Great question.
What he's going to do to us if we don't.
It's a great question.
So that's just where I'm at personally. And
so one, recognize that at least from the Bible standpoint, he knew before the foundations of the earth were laid. So before he created man, he knew he was going to die. The Bible says he's already crucified. Jesus was before the foundations of the earth were laid. So he knew all of this before he started any of it. He was going to end up having to go to the cross. That makes no sense that he would do it then, right? But yet the Bible says that he did do it. I think you have to start, instead of looking at it from man's perspective and saying, then God, why did you do it? You need to start looking at it from his and say, wait a minute. But if he still did do it, then start asking, is there a reason why he felt compelled to do it? That would make sense with him being a perfect character, being perfect in character. And I think it comes to this. The Bible says that God inhabits the praises of Israel. Okay, so if the angels, when they were created, the only thing that makes sense for them to do of what the Bible says before man's around is for there to be worship of God. So I think it's you have to ask, okay, God, if you didn't need their worship, why in the world would you create them if you know that they're going to end up going where a third of them end up in hell? And I told you, I think it's because he's compelled. I think it's because if God can inhabit the praises of Israel, he probably could inhabit the praises of the angels. And is it possible that if he doesn't inhabit their praise, when he knows that he could inhabit their praise, that there was something that he realized that he could have, that if he didn't have it, he would become something less than perfect without it. And I'll tell you here, and it can't be something that comes from outside of himself, because if it does, it means that other thing's God. It can't be coming from a need, because if he has a need, then he's not God. I think it has to be that it comes from an internal want that he could have. And the only thing that makes sense from an eternal want that he could have that would lead him to go down the pathway of creating all this stuff when he knows it could fall is that if he knew that internal want was to have more of himself.
Yeah.
And if he had more of himself, if he knew he could have it within the praises of this created being that has free will, then his first initial reaction would probably be, then I'm not going to create them because I know a third of them are going to end up in hell. The only thing that would make sense for why he would still create them is if he knew that he himself would end up in hell if he didn't create them, but he also knew that he had a solution that made it so none of them had to go to hell, and he wouldn't have to be in hell either.
Okay. So I don't know if you see the super chat we got from Wittershins. Thank you so much. Why is eternal damnation the solution to being incompatible with God? Why not dissolve the soul completely and bypass a system of suffering?
Because the soul that liveth never dies. The Bible is clear that someone's spirit lives eternally. It's the reason why the angels, when they die, when they rebelled against him, they aren't just eliminated. It's that they are an eternal being, because that's just the nature. That's the nature of what they are.
Yeah, but God didn't just
powerful,
make
so
A
these.
spiritual being is
makes him not eternal,
But
right?
he makes the rules. He makes the spiritual being. He can unmake. He's allowed to kill and do all these other really strange things that don't make logical sense to us. But a simple action is somehow.
But what
just
he's told,
off the table.
well, just like his nature is that he is an eternal, perfect being. Everything that he created that was spiritual is an eternal. A spiritual being is eternal. It's the reason why.
Why does it have to be eternal?
It's just the nature of things.
But
It is
God
what
can
it
change
is.
The nature of that.
No, he can't.
He can't.
No,
Can't or won't.
can't. Because a spiritual being. Remember, I said I don't believe as some Christians believe. I believe that some things are determined. And I think the nature of God is determined, and I think the nature of all of us as
Who
being
determines
spiritual
that?
beings, because it's because when he created us in his image, and part of that being that image is that we are eternal.
Well, we're at the 2-hour mark.
Yeah,
I think we're going to wrap it up.
we'll pick it up another time.
Yeah.
'Cause
Yeah,
I think these are.
I
I
love this
think these are.
conversation. It's good.
And I've only I feel like a little like Apollo 13, I feel like I've hit the atmosphere and probably bounced off on y'all. And it's because there's a lot of other aspects of this thing that I would need to explain that go deeper into before some of the other things that I'm saying make sense.
I feel like a prophet because I feel like I called this from the outset. I knew this would happen.
That we'd have to come back together
Yeah.
again.
Oh yeah.
You
Oh,
called
yeah.
it, Ben.
That's good though.
Yeah, I've got the gift. I'm going to share my gift with everyone.
You are prophetic.
Beautiful.
Sing us a song, Ben. Sing us a song.
Oh,
He put on mute.
why don't you grow some hair? Okay.
Hey, thanks for having me on tonight. I
Hey.
appreciate it. I've enjoyed the discussion.
So much.
It's been great. I know we don't agree with each other and all that, but that doesn't mean that we can't be respectful of each other. And I think it doesn't mean that we can't care for each other. And hopefully, I hope that someday we'll, from a friendship standpoint, would get to the point where we would actually say, "Gosh, I really care about what happens in your life."
We're actually going to host the first TART get together nationwide at the church that you attend. So just so you know, that's going to happen.
Word.
Is he frozen?
That's a. I'm sorry. We'll be that good of friends.
I think he's frozen.
I think he,
Frozen.
No, and I hate that because I didn't mean to just make light of that because that's important. That is important. That is so important. I'm sorry I made a light of it, and then he's not going to be on here.
Dang.
That's what happens. This is God's punishment.
Oh my!
He's
Oh
saving
my.
his people.
oh, that was
That's what I
great.
get for trying to be funny. I'm usually
back.
deadpan.
So
You're not? Okay.
is he back? Is he
Is
back?
that-
Oh no!
Almost.
I was rude, and then that's what happened.
Yeah,
Um,
man.
Yeah, so I'm gonna give him a second to come back because I do want him to be able to shield
finish
plug anything because we didn't do that up top. But great conversation, guys. And Kay again. This was round number 2 for Kay tonight. So great job, Kay.
Thank you.
And Jeff did a great job of opening up. And you got to see the friendly troll tonight.
Yeah.
You got to see the friend.
Yeah.
That was so cute and so precious to see him up top, like asking interview questions and where are you from? What do you love to do?
This is how it works.
Did it hurt?
When you go fishing
Were you
like
burning on the inside?
Are you a fisher? Do you go fishing?
Hell no.
Does anybody? So listen, when you go fishing, it's a patient task. Cast that reel gently into the water
Gently.
and then tug it just a little bit to bring it back in. You don't go all crazy right at the beginning. You got to entice your prey.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And then when you have them hooked, bring them in. That's how that works.
Fair enough.
I don't understand. Hey, Eddie,
Eddie's upset because he didn't get the questions I asked to him.
well, he said chill with the bald insults, and I was like, why?
Listen, if they get to have nice facial hair, then I can have nice upper hair.
There you go. This is about the extent of what I can do. So
Yeah. So screw you, Oz. This is
Yeah,
what you get.
same. I tried growing it out before. It just doesn't work.
All right, we'll give him a couple seconds, and yeah, if Kay jumps on here with a beard next time, I'm just asking some questions. I mean, you're still more than welcome. I just got to ask some questions because.
Like, how much testosterone did you inject to grow a beard?
But no, I don't. Because a couple of comments popped up. I don't fit. I'm not an outdoors guy at all. I'm a city boy. I don't like me and the outdoors. Don't get along.
Can we take a TART camping trip sometime?
Fuck
Yes.
no.
Let's go into the Cahutta Wilderness in northern Tennessee.
Yes.
Listen, you guys can.
No, your comment cannot be.
You're
The
coming.
entertainment would be watching you have to figure out how to do
100%.
that shit outside.
No, it won't. It will not happen ever. Not in my life.
Let's just see. For the viewers at home, if you want to see a TART camping trip sometime post-COVID next year, let us know in the comments, and we will force Oz to go.
it's going to be a TART hype house.
I'll record it all while we're there. We'll have campfire, kumbaya, we'll bring T-Jump, and we'll talk philosophy around the campfire. It'll be fantastic. And Oz will be upset about mosquitoes and
Tell
bugs
ghost stories,
and
but
scorpions.
they're just stories from the Bible.
Yeah, we'll read stories from the Bible as horror stories.
We've
And
already
then
read all
God made a deal with Satan to fuck up Job's house and ask for permission.
Well, if we're gonna do that, if we're gonna be sitting by a bonfire and shit, we got to read Revelation where we all just burn.
And then we can possibly burn some books.
I'm down for that. I know that's your thing. That you get a little excited over that.
I'm
So
sweating.
We can do that.
We got a serial killer and an arsonist. Beautiful.
Okay, every kid's an arsonist. We all like fire.
Every kid's a narcissist. What?
Arsonist.
Arsonist.
And an narcissist. I think most kids are narcissists. You think the kids think anything else exists but them?
Not until about the age of 7 or 8. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, I don't think. I think Greg's phone or tablet, whatever he was on, has officially died and is not resurrecting, like his God. So we'll go ahead and call it a night. Again, great job to you guys. And even though he's not here, thank you to Greg for coming on. You're a great guest. We appreciate it. And hopefully you hear this either right now or later on. We appreciate you coming on and being respectful and cordial with us. And hopefully you enjoyed your time here. And we will set something else up with you because there's plenty of conversations that we didn't really get into the depths of it, so to speak. So we love it. Titan Rain, he said, yeah, look at Oz. He's honestly unhappy about that thought. Yes. Fuck camping, fuck outdoors. Fuck
This
all
is
that.
why we want to see it, though.
Yeah.
That you understand you're the entertainment. You being upset
Now
is
you-
what
now
we
you
want to see.
Yeah, now you see, you hypocrite. Now you sound like the God of the Bible. We just want to watch you burn.
No, I didn't say burn.
I want to be entertained by
Suffer
your.
a little bit.
I
It
want
is
to
entertaining.
watch you suffer. I want you to feel it. And I
Teach
want
you
to
a
watch it.
lesson.
You're such a dick, Jeff. You're such
Hey,
a-
listen, people love reading the Bible. They'll love watching the story.
It's like the best-selling book of all time.
Yeah, it's the best-selling book of all time. We'll role play
Let's
different
see,
stories of the
that
Bible.
fact.
Ooh, can I be Lot?
All right. Well, guys, thanks for hanging out. Make sure you hit the like, the subscribe, and we'll be back with you tomorrow night. Eddie has a surprise debate opponent for our debate tomorrow night, and that shit's about to be wild. So, thank you.